Hi, and welcome back to the third section in this training. We're looking at expelling students. So the grounds for suspension or recommendation for expelling a student are the same for children with and without disabilities. The law states specifically that a free, appropriate public education must be available to all students with disabilities, including children who have been suspended or expelled from school. And it specifically says that if a student is suspended for any time beyond 10 days, they must have a free appropriate education. So we're going to be moving on to what does it mean when we're expelling students, and we're looking at alternative education settings. So under certain circumstances, a district can immediately remove a student and place them in an alternative education setting up to 45 school days without regard to whether the behavior is determined to be a manifestation of the child's disability. If the child has had anything to do with the following, and we're going to be looking at the first item is weapons. So if a student carries a weapon to or possesses a weapon at a school, on school premises, or to any school function, the term dangerous weapon means a weapon, device, instrument, material, or substance animated or inanimated that is used for or is repeatedly capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, except that such term does not include a pocket knife with a blade of less than 2.5 inches in length. So for instance, when we talk about animated or inanimated, it could be a man-made weapon out of a piece of wood that can hurt someone. So we need to be mindful that we're talking to our students about the code of conduct and what each of these areas mean, and to make sure that we're preventing and being proactive. We're also looking at illegal drugs. So knowingly possess or using illegal drugs, or selling or solicit the sale of a controlled substance while at school, on school premises, or at a school function. So when we're looking at this, we're also talking not just about the hours of the school day, but anything that happens after school, any activity that takes place in the evening. It could be a prom, it could be a sports activity or an event, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the school's grounds for it to be an infraction. It could take place if a student is traveling to another school or another location, but is still in the care of the school. That would be a school function. So students need to know that their actions are going to be watched in every single school event, including during the day, in the evening, or off-site. Now we're moving to serious bodily injury, and when we look at serious bodily injury, we're looking at that it truly inflicts serious bodily injury upon another person. And again, we're looking at while at school, on school premises, or at a school function. And the Department of Education states that the term serious bodily injury means bodily injury that involves a substantial risk to death, extreme physical pain, protracted and obvious disfigurement, or protracted loss of impairment of the function of a body, member, organ, or mental faculty. And again, this is coming right from regulations. And then the school also can include law enforcement. They can make calls to law enforcement if they feel that there's a threat, if they feel that there's something very serious going on. They could make a referral to, and action can be taken by law enforcement and judicial authorities. So nothing in this part prohibits an agency from reporting a crime committed by a child with a disability to appropriate authorities, or prevents state law enforcement and judicial authorities from exercising their responsibilities with regard to the application of federal and state law to crimes committed by a child with a disability. An agency reporting a crime committed by a child with a disability must ensure that copies of the special education and disciplinary records of the child are transmitted for consideration by the appropriate authorities to whom the agency reports the crime. An agency reporting a crime under this section may transmit copies of the child's special education and disciplinary records only to the extent that the transmission is permitted by the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. So again, any time that we see serious bodily injury, illegal substances and weapons, do know that the school has a responsibility at times to notify law enforcement if it is of very serious nature. And again, why it's important that your students, your children understand their responsibility and the code of conduct. So moving away from expelling, we're looking at unique circumstances now. And when we look at unique circumstances, we look at federal law. So we're looking at Individuals with Disability Education Act, which encourages careful consideration of the student and the situation prior to suspending or determining a change of placement. And the law reads, school personnel must consider any unique circumstance on a case-by-case basis in determining whether a change of placement is appropriate for a child with a disability. So what does that mean? For an example, your son or daughter has been bullied for months by another student, and one day they swear at the other student. As a parent, you may want to be prepared to discuss this fact as a unique circumstance in order to explain that your son or daughter's behavior. Some schools may not be familiar with this section of IDEA or your son or daughter's situation. This can make all the difference in determining whether they suspend him. Be prepared to discuss unique circumstances while continuing to emphasize that you are interested in helping to develop a plan to address the behavior so that it does not reoccur again. And again, this goes back to earlier discussions throughout the training about the paper trail and making sure that you're documenting things that are happening. So basis of knowledge, when we look at basis of knowledge, this is specifically, we're presuming the student is presumed to have a disability for discipline purposes. So the district has knowledge that the student may have a disability before the behavior occurred. The student is then presumed to have a disability for discipline purposes. So basis of knowledge means that the parent of the student has expressed concern in writing to an administrator, to somebody in authority, or to a teacher of the student that the student is possibly in need of special education services, that the parent of the student requested an evaluation of the student, or a teacher of the student or another district personnel has expressed a specific concern about a pattern of behavior demonstrated by the student. So again, we're looking at that paper trail, and if a parent has provided a basis of knowledge, then they would have these protections, and they would be looking at expediting special education services perhaps, but they would have protections if the student was then suspended. The only time that it wouldn't be in writing, a base of knowledge is usually in writing unless a parent has difficulty with writing. Then if a parent has made a verbal concern known to somebody, then that would be enough for that base of knowledge to be there. And now we're moving on to the focus of the meeting. So remembering that when we have meetings, that we need to take them serious. Anytime that you're invited to be at a meeting for your child, it is of serious nature when we're talking about suspension. So do your homework, ask clarifying questions, get necessary paperwork and information to help prepare you for providing your case and asking for what is needed to help your child move forward. It's also extremely important to lead by example and help your child know that this is an important process and needs to be taken seriously. Dress appropriate. Use appropriate language that respects all, even if you don't agree or have a different viewpoint. As we always stress to families, remember to thank everyone for their time, even if the meeting didn't go the way that you had hoped it would. The focus of the meetings should be about moving forward. It should be on determining the most appropriate supports that will support the student in learning, looking at the skills the student needs in order to be successful at school and as an adult. Although it is never easy hearing your child is being suspended, the discipline and suspension process ensures your child's rights to a free, appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. It's through this process that the school can gain more information about what your child needs in order to be supported around their behaviors and their learning. And I thank you for joining me today, and goodbye.